button. There we go. Good morning on Easter morning, 2021. Nice to see you all here, Contemporary Issues class. Thought we'd talk a little about things in the news and about Easter resurrection too. Just share a few thoughts with you on the concept of resurrection and how we look at it today from different perspectives. So we will do that, but our usual announcements first. Please mute yourself in the lower left corner of the screen as usual. Keep our background noise down, and we are recording this for future playback. And we'll all be kind to each other and our speaker today as usual. And we have more people coming on screen, so that's good. But how's everybody doing on Easter? What'd you think of Mark's sermon today? Starting off with the Thomas Jefferson edited version of the Bible. It ends on Good Friday, it doesn't go to Easter Sunday. I always think that's an interesting concept. I think Jefferson represents a lot of people who probably don't believe in the miracles, but they love the Jesus moral messages and teachings. Does everybody know about that and have heard about the Jefferson Bible?
I did not know.
I knew about it. I
Yeah,
visited his place.
I've been there too, and it's pretty cool. And they got the Bible and all that. Yeah,
Right. It's on display there.
yep,
In the
It's-
background to it.
yeah, it's pretty cool there.
I remember that too at Monticello when I was there 30
Yeah,
years ago, probably. And they've got his study redone just as he had it back in the day, and his boots are standing right there and his Bible is there, and it's quite a neat place. But I thought that was really kind of a good germane thing to mention on Easter Sunday, that Jefferson and some others don't believe in the miracles. They just seem too fantastical for some people to believe. And so he just cut them right out and made his own little Bible. Hello, Doug. Good morning.
Good morning.
We are talking about all kinds of things this morning. And then-
that's what people do today, though. If they don't like something, they just X out what they don't like, and then they go along with the stuff they like in a newspaper article or in life or whatever.
It's true.
Yeah, I don't think that's not, I mean, it's not uncommon, but for the Bible part, it is, yeah.
It's human nature. That's
Uh-huh.
right.
You had a Bible that was just printed on one side of the paper. Otherwise, if you cut up one side, it would, slice up the verses on the other side.
Good point. Good point.
True.
Very good. Well, what else in the news that was interesting this week? The Capitol Police attack. Isn't that sad to see another thing happen at the U.S. Capitol? And they're going to have to rethink their security strategy so they don't keep putting the Capitol Police at risk too. Maybe they can put the barriers farther out and keep the police farther back. It's just a sad thing to see.
Well, they could build these retractable barriers that go up and down in the ground. And so
Yeah, they might have to do
as a
that.
situation develop, you just pull those things up to keep a car from hitting somebody, yet it doesn't ruin your views and maybe your
Well, that's a good idea.
Mhm.
I've seen
Actually,
those used a number of places.
Yeah, actually, I believe that's what stopped the car. It was one of those that, as you're talking about, Terry, that came up and prevented him from going forward. But
Could
you could
be.
certainly become more retractable than doing what you're suggesting. Yes.
It just seems to me they've got to think through all the scenarios of the different types of dangers and plan better for each of them. But
Problem is,
I'm no
how
expert.
much they want to spend to do that.
Right.
The technology and the capabilities of doing it is just how much they're willing to, how many dollars they're willing to put behind it.
Yes.
Bigger fear is somebody doing a car bomb, like the truck bomb at the Alfred E. Murrow building in Oklahoma City,
Yeah.
Marine barracks in the Middle East that one year. And that, of course, requires barriers to be placed, dozens of yards, if not more, further back from what you're trying to protect.
That's what I thought when I first heard this one yesterday or the day before, that it probably had a bomb in the car, but it didn't turn out. Yeah. What a sad thing. Well, one other news item too, I was interested in your opinions on this week, was the Biden big infrastructure $2 trillion project. It was today on the news, they were saying how the Republicans, of course, are saying it's spending too much money and it's going to bankrupt the country. And some of the progressives, like the AOC woman, said, oh, we need to spend more. It's not enough to spend on roads and bridges and green energy and all that. So what do you think? Do you think we're spending way too much?
Well, if they built the trains, for example, we would ride them. How'd you like to ride a train all over those high-speed trains like Europe and
Yeah.
England? They go 120, 140 miles an hour. Get you there in no time.
That'd be expensive, but
Isn't the money from this supposed to come from the taxes on the people that earn, I don't know, is it more than 400?
yes, that's what he
Whatever.
pledged.
So
Corporations, corporations and
the
people just over
average.
400.
Yeah.
And corporations.
Yeah. And I was reading that Jerome Powell,
1800s.
the Fed Reserve Chairman, said with interest rates low now, we can service the debt for many years to come on this. And it's not, in his opinion, a completely unreasonable spending level. So that's another opinion.
Well, I think raising the corporate tax from 21 to, I mean, they're proposing 28. That's a bargaining position. I think if it were to be raised to 25, that would be reasonable and, certainly fair and comparable to other countries, and also, only taxing the families that make 400,000 plus. I mean, it makes perfect sense. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance in the country, and when you have communities that don't even have potable water,
Yeah.
it's time.
Yeah, I read the
think I
Engineers
think it's very
Society said,
misleading. I think it's very misleading when they compare us to corporations outside the country. And I'll give you an example. In Europe, they pay enough wage so that the worker pays their own benefit. Where in the U.S. companies pay for your unemployment, parts of your health insurance. Corporations in Europe and England do not pay any of that. The worker is paid enough money so that they can buy their own, and then they can't qualify for subsidized government benefits. So it's apples and oranges, they're saying all the time.
Mhm.
And another thing, most corporations utilize the infrastructure to, deliver goods and receive goods, etc. So they should be paying for a significant portion of the infrastructure utilization and, remodeling.
Right.
Good point. I read too that the Society of Engineers said, civil engineers said that they gave a grade of D, as in dog, to America's infrastructure. It was getting so bad and deferred for so long. They said it's almost as bad as it can be. So
Well, and I don't know how we can be competitive in the world if we don't have broadband and internet for the entire country. I mean, that's debilitating now because a lot of students don't even have that to get through COVID and are falling so far behind. I mean, it's also positioning us for the future vis-a-vis the rest of the world.
Good point.
One interesting thing, the broadband has been expanded in the I-70 corridor clear through Vail, and business people can work at their Vail places now as if they were at work.
That's good. Okay, well,
I like
anything
to
else?
mention what was in the Denver Post today, and Ron would really love this. Russ Lambert taught people to give money to the Trump campaign through a particular website. People went and did that. They gave a donation. But unknown to them, if you didn't check a little box in the corner of that donation, it was a repeat donation automatically taken out of their checking accounts. The stories in the Denver Post today, one person gave $900 and some and he thought it was a one-time donation. They ended up taking $8,000 out of his account. Another person had money taken out of his account and he can't pay his mortgage or his health care or any of those benefits because he didn't know he had to check this box that there was only be a one-time donation. It's in the front page of the Denver Post.
Oh, thank you. We'll read that.
Yeah.
Ron will love that.
Watch what you sign up for. That's right.
Yeah.
Check the right box.
Yeah. Well, any other news or announcements before we talk about it? We'll do prayers for Ron's cousin who was in the car accident and that whole situation. And my wife, Vicky, with her new hip, she's coming along good with it. Couple days in now, and
Did she have a new hip?
she got, yes, her second new hip. So she's
Second
even,
one, huh?
she's evened up on both sides now. She
Oh, good. Glad
she
to hear
won't
that.
be wobbly. Yeah.
Oh,
Let's remember Kendall too.
Yes,
Kendall was in surgery for
Friday.
actually,
Friday, yeah.
yeah, how do we
what was that
describe
for?
that? That, I was just thinking, how do we describe that? A transgender surgery from the waist up is my understanding.
Oh,
That
Oh,
yes,
from the waist up. Oh,
that's
okay.
that's yes.
Okay.
She joked publicly on Facebook that it was a weight off her chest. And
Okay, I
so-
didn't quite get off. Okay, I knew it was something like that, but okay.
Yes, so keep her in prayers too.
mhm.
Well, let's have a little discussion today about resurrection. And I want to see what you all think about that. And so I'm going to share screen here. Can you see my little picture on the screen here? All right, Terry, do you see it
Yep.
on the
Yeah.
share screen? Okay, good.
Mm.
Because I just was curious about the topic of resurrection, what the Jewish people at the time thought of resurrection when Jesus lived, and what Christians today are saying about it, and what we take away as the meaning. So let me just read a couple things here, and you all share your thoughts too, please. This is from Wikipedia online. It says resurrection or anastasis, probably the Latin or Greek term, is a concept of coming back to life after death. In a number of religions, a dying and rising God is a deity which dies and resurrects. Excuse me. The accounts in the Christian Gospels, including the empty tomb and the appearances of the risen Jesus, have been interpreted in various ways,
Well,
including as a literal event, also possibly visionary experiences described, and parables. And some people believe as a fabrication by the early Christian writers. It's been suggested, for example, that Jesus did not die on the cross, that the empty tomb was a result of his body being stolen, or as was common with Roman crucifixions, that Jesus was never entombed. So lots of different ways people look at this today, conservatives and liberals. So back in the day, the three main Jewish sects in the 1st century AD were the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Pharisees. The Sadducees believed that both the soul and body perished at death. The Essenes believed the soul was immortal, but the flesh was not. And the Pharisees that the soul was immortal and that the body would be resurrected to house it. Of these three positions, Jesus and the early Christians appeared to have been closest to that of the Pharisees. Resurrection was available to the righteous alone. It would make them equal to the angels, as the Gospels say. Tell those who accounted worthy to the resurrection from the dead are equal to the angels and are children of God. Nor would the resurrection body be one of flesh and blood, but an immortal, fleshless body of the celestial nature, as of the sun, the moon, and the stars. So that made me think that kind of a common belief today among some Christians is that Jews didn't believe in any resurrection, none of the Jews at the time, and that idea just came along with Jesus, which is not what is taught. They say the Pharisees at the time did believe in the resurrection of the body to the immortal soul. It says the Jews did not believe that the dead could enter heaven. Mankind's place was the earth, and heaven was for God and for heavenly beings. The Greeks held a similar view, but they also held that a man of exceptional merit, could be exalted as a god after his death. Successors of Alexander the Great made this idea well known throughout the Middle East, with coins bearing his image, previously reserved for gods. And although originally foreign to the Romans, the doctrine was soon borrowed by the emperors for purposes of political propaganda. So just interesting to see what was believed earlier at the time. The concept of resurrection is also found in the writings of some of the non-Abrahamic religions in the Middle East. A few of the Egyptian and Canaanite writings allude to dying and rising gods such as Osiris and Baal. The ancient Greek religion, in the Greek religion, a number of men and women became physically immortal as they were resurrected from the dead. As Cephalus was killed by Zeus, only to be resurrected and transformed into a deity. In the New Testament, Jesus is said to have raised several persons from death, including the daughter of Jairus shortly after death, a young man in the midst of his own funeral procession, and Lazarus, who was buried for 4 days. And then in the Act of Apostles, St. Peter raised a woman named Dorcas, and Paul the Apostle revived a man named Eutychus, who had fallen asleep and fell from a window to his death. According to Matthew, after Jesus' resurrection, many of the previously dead came out of their tombs and entered Jerusalem. So resurrection showed up not just at Jesus' time, but before and then after, with the Gospels saying that the apostles also raised people. So what do you all think of that? Did you know that previously? What did you think? Sorry about that. It sounded like some scratching. Did you hear that too?
Yeah.
You did too, Lois. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure what that was. Well, what did you all think? Have you heard that before, that the dying and rising stories were common in the old days? Had you heard that?
No, I never had.
Well, I know, reading about the American Indians, of course, who are continually warring with one another, they often mutilated the bodies of their killed opponents, their opponent would still carry
It's a violent noise. I don't know what it is.
Okay,
There, if everybody would mute. If you're not speaking, please mute so we can try and not have that background noise. I hope it's not my computer doing that.
That was Jim Watson's computer, and he signed off.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Ron, go ahead. Repeat what you said, please.
I know with the American Indian cultures, they were always warring one another. And some of the American Indian tribes would mutilate the bodies of their opponents upon death, thinking that they were punishing their opponents in the afterlife, thinking that the resurrected opponent in the spirit world would come back with a mutilated, messed up body instead of a perfect one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we look through world history and we see several examples of that belief.
Is that why they scalped them?
I'm sorry?
Is that why they scalloped people? Took their heads off?
No, that wasn't the main reason. They would literally go at you with hatchets and knives and make sure you came back a mess.
I remember that too from earlier cultures, thinking if you were mutilated in this life, it would carry over into the next.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which brings up the puzzling question of if there's a bodily resurrection, which body do they bring back? Would I come back with my 2 hip replacements? Would I come back at age 21? What if I wasn't happy with my looks and body, and could I do a trade up?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Good
if you're a
question.
Mormon, you get to sit at the right hand of Christ, and you get to have a new wife if you so choose.
Does she get that choice? I guess not.
She doesn't get a choice, but you get to. So you hold it over her head all the years you were married, because if she doesn't perform like you want, he won't let her be there, and he'll pick a new one. And that's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, this all does bring up the topic of was it a literal physical resurrection? Just as a quick reading would make it appear, or was it a symbolic resurrection that was changed sometime or added, the story added after Jesus died by Christian writers? Or how are we to understand it? Of course, go ahead.
Doesn't it say dust thou art and unto dust shall you return? That's your earthly body. But that's not you. Not really you. That's just your body.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Vatican City and go to the Sistine chapter, it shows all that.
It shows what, Terry?
Well, they decide who goes to hell and who goes to heaven. And you know where Michelangelo placed himself in that picture, in that painting, don't you? He's halfway up there. He painted a
Okay.
self-portrait being halfway up there,
Mhm.
neither in heaven nor hell, but he's there.
Mhm.
Have
Okay.
any of you ever heard of the Shroud of Turin? Don't mute me.
Sure.
This is the shroud that supposedly Jesus was wrapped in, and I guess on his resurrection, shadows were left on this shroud. And you know, it's interesting to read about. I don't know if I 100% believe in it, but it sure is interesting. So.
It would be amazing if his actual shroud was kept and prove that it was his, but hard to prove.
Yeah.
Hard to
And-
prove, sure
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and Steve, in some of the conversations we've had regarding those who have experienced the light and gone forward, they speak, at least if I recall correctly, they speak of seeing and experiencing souls. They did not say, my opinion, they did not say that they saw bodies. They saw souls. So
Yes. Yes, that's what Bob Alexander of our Sunday school class said he saw when he had a near-death experience, and others too. And that does bring up the topic of, what is the resurrected body? For example, Jesus, described in the Gospels, his body was looked like physical body, and he ate with the disciples afterwards, but he could also pass through doors, pass through solid walls, and it was obviously a different type of body than a physical earthly body. So who knows?
But
Who
he
knows?
still had in his body, he still, remember when he went to meet his friends, and I can't remember, was it Thomas who didn't believe him? And he showed him where they had sorted him. So that was still, he came back with that. So he still
that.
had that
He
on his
had
body.
some attributes of his earthly body and some
Right.
attributes of a spiritual body.
So we could come back with rheumatism and everything else just because we died doesn't mean arthritis and all
point.
that.
People that are cremated, don't they believe that you can be cremated because it's only your soul that rises?
Yeah. I think so.
I've heard
I
that. too.
believe. Yeah.
Well, as we discuss this, obviously for a lot of people, it sounds like mythology and fanciful stories that were just written maybe after the fact. And maybe that's true, but there's also, of course, the other side of conservatives that really argue passionately that it's all true and literal as written. And I want to read you just a couple of things that they say. New Testament scholar and theologian E.P. Sanders argues that a concerted plot to foster belief in the resurrection would have resulted in a more consistent story if the disciples had made it up, or the writers afterwards, and that some of those involved in the events gave their lives for their belief, and it would not have likely happened. They would not have been able to hold together a conspiracy like that. Sanders offers his own hypothesis, saying there seems to have been a competition for people to say in the Gospels, I saw him, and the women saw him first. But it was difficult at that time for anyone to write or say that women were to be believed, because it was not a cultural tradition, an accepted cultural practice of that time to have women speaking with authority. So that's another reason he thinks that the story is true, because women were included, and that would not have been the case if they were trying at that time to write a more believable story. Also, theologian and author N.T. Wright argues that the account of the empty tomb and the visionary experiences point toward the historical reality of the resurrection, in his opinion. He suggests the multiple lines of evidence from the New Testament and the early Christian beliefs reflected show that it would be highly unlikely that the empty tomb would simply appear without a clear basis in the memory of the early Christians. And he also points out the point about the women witnesses also. So those are a couple of the reasons that people defend the conservative view of it today.
Adding to the wonderment, it describes the person sitting on the stone, implies that person was an angel, but it does say it was a young man. So once again, we're puzzled with, Was this an angel? Was this a resurrected person? And if so, why was it a male and why were they young? And what did they look like physically, other than the description of being a young man?
And that reminds of like the virgin birth. Reference to a virgin was also a word translated earlier as just young woman and not necessarily a virgin. So lots of questions on the translation and how it comes to us. Well, what do you all think? Does anybody want to be brave and offer their opinion on whether they think the resurrection was physical or a more symbolic story? No judgment.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay, Alice, you get the award for bravery today.
I believe he was resurrected because I know he is alive. I can feel him, and it's a story that, yeah, it's hard to believe, but I believe it. It's faith, okay? Comes back to faith.
Vicky off screen says, amen to you, Alice.
Yay!
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Mhm.
And I do too, you know. I think that if we have a God that could produce the Big Bang and everything that is, he could find a way to do this physical resurrection, even if it was predicted earlier by earlier religions. He could say, I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to come visit.
Absolutely.
Actually, Steve, by agreeing with Alice, it gives me comfort. And so I'm accepting of that because it does just that. It gives me comfort.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But I know too, as I look at who's on the screen, that we have some folks who do not believe in anything spiritual, and that's okay, that they just have a different viewpoint and that it was not a physical resurrection. And I enjoy talking with you folks too who do that. And I hope you don't feel judgment from people in a negative way.
But you know, in the story, people met Jesus on the road or the path. Quite often people see images of people in their everyday life. They think, oh, they remind them of that person or that friend or that special person that they see that image. And so why did they do that? They believe it's something, that there's a resurrection when you see other people that remind you in that image.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try talking.
Hi, Jim.
I
Sound
had
fine.
a terrible time getting on today. All that noise, I don't know what it was. But anyway, I'm going to be the sacrilegious one. I
It's
believe
okay.
in spirit, but I don't believe in a physical resurrection. I think that is because, you know, everything that exists dies. You know,
Right.
Jesus talked about the birds of the air and the flowers. You know, God cares for them, but they all die. We all die. And he said, when the Pharisees asked him about where the kingdom of God is, he said, it's not something to be seen. It's not here or there, because the kingdom of God is within you. So I believe in, you know, the resurrection of the spirit, if you will. But I think it's, you know, first, second century salesmanship. Most of the people then were illiterate. You know, they were, you know, maybe not ignorant, but they were illiterate, and they were not as sophisticated, you know, I would think, as we are today. And and they had all kinds of fanciful stories to sell ideas back then, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we
the,
just read about that. The Jews at that time had all different opinions about if resurrection and
yeah,
whether the soul lived or whether the body lived.
yeah. I think that idea was salesmanship of, you know, for Christianity. So,
It's okay.
not taking anything away from Alice's belief.
We surely don't want to be resurrected with our aches and pains.
Amen.
Yes.
Good
I can tell
point.
you my story again about the elderly couple waking up in the morning, you know, and she says to her husband, "I think I'm dead." He said, "What do you mean you think you're dead? You're talking to me, aren't you?" And she says, "Well, I woke up and nothing hurts."
Yeah. Mhm. No. Mhm.
I guess I've told that the last time.
I heard that one. Yeah. Mhm.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, well, how do you think most people look at the Easter story today? You think the average person that would go to a church service on Sunday, do you think they even think about whether it was a literal resurrection or a spiritual story?
Well, I think the state of the church, Church Universal, is in sad shape. You know, we're losing members all the time, and for the first time in our history, I guess, less than 50% of the population claims connection with the church.
Right, right.
People are,
I look at the resurrection as the beginning of a new start. So
Mhm.
spring is a new start. So do you want to believe that there's a chance to start something over again or just continue what you've always been doing?
That's
And
good.
Mark covered that in his sermon today also. He said, of course, that was one of the meanings of Easter was not just a hope for afterlife, but also a new start here. And he mentioned the story about the man that had been in prison that was starting over and meeting someone new in a coffee shop. And
I
so
think
that's,
Mark had a great sermon today. I would call it the equivalent of a Christian call to arms.
very good.
And,
Have you all known anybody that has had a dramatic new change like that? Dramatically changed their life?
Mm.
Vicky's just telling me that, reminding me that we have a friend who changed. He had been not an atheist, but more of an agnostic and not very spiritual. And he had a change of heart a few years ago and became very spiritual and kind of started a new life.
Was there an incident of some kind?
Yes, there was family pressures and mental pressures that caused him to do that.
I look at Jimmy Carter as being one that set that example.
His post-presidency time, really starting a new life of service. Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who are in jail get religious and they come out and then they want to help people and, you know, they hopefully, you know, do a turnaround. So, you know, it does happen in jail.
An example, yes, Susie, is Hassan Latif here in Denver, the Second Chance Center that we worked with St. Andrew. He came out of jail and started a whole new ministry for ex-cons and has done amazing things. Yeah.
If you've ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can about Frank Abagnale, reading the book is even more amazing. And yet clearly he did transform a great deal between his 18th birthday and who he is now.
Hmm.
I don't think he even claims though it was instantaneous, or it was kind of a slowly evolving, coming to the light, shall we call it?
Hmm. Point.
I think too, people who have been like really ill, like, I don't want to say terminal, but really ill, and they've, you know, they were praying and it's been going on for years, and then they're better. Not miraculously, but you know, a lot of people get more religious when that happens.
Yeah, and of course, there's many stories about people coming back from near-death experiences and
Yeah.
being completely changed and saying that it showed me a whole new way, and they dedicate their life to service, and it's like a resurrection, a second chance for them. Well, another thing that I think about when I think about resurrection and God in general is about smart people. Sometimes I have the impression that Christians think that the smartest people, especially the scientists, really have an inside intuition, an inside better understanding about these things than we average intelligence people do. And so I just recently read a book called Einstein and Religion. And I thought it was pretty good. Might even do a little class to review that, because he was an interesting character too, you know, in what he believed. He didn't believe in the resurrection really, or miracles. And Einstein said that, quote, the problem of God is too vast for our limited minds. The child dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangements of the book of the universe, but he doesn't know what it is. That seems to me to be the attitude of even the most intelligent human beings toward God. Einstein also shared his final opinions in a letter he wrote in 1954. He said, "The word God is for me nothing more than the expression and product of human weakness. The Bible, a collection of honorable but purely primitive legends which are pretty childish. No interpretation, how subtle, is going to change this for me." So that was one smart guy's opinion. On the other hand, there's a modern scientist who believes in a personal God, and that is Francis Collins, an American physicist and geneticist who's known for his leadership of the Human Genome Project in Bethsaida, Maryland. Collins has written books on science, medicine, and religion, including The Language of God, A Scientist Presents Evidence for Belief. I just think it's interesting that modern day smart scientists have different opinions from Einstein, so we can't really point to any particular smart people as having the greatest insight, because they differ on these things.
You think are the limits of our human brains, you know, consider the universe, the vastness of the universe, you know, it's beyond our comprehension. And but there's something behind it. There's organization, there's order behind it. And we don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's
I
what
abs-
Einstein said. Einstein said,
finite creatures.
Mhm. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
We just have to believe it on faith because it's too big for us,
Yeah,
too big for my little mind to get around it. I
yeah.
can't, he created the whole world and the whole universe and all of the people and still creating. How can we diminish that by believing that we got it figured out? We can't figure that out.
We even put God in our image, saying that we were in his image.
And that's one thing that Einstein pointed out. He didn't like anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
he said he believed in an intelligent creator that made the physical laws, but that's as far as he thinks we could go in understanding it. And that beyond that is just creations of the human mind trying to explain what they think God is.
We've been
Exactly.
trying to do that since the very beginning.
Mhm.
Stephen Hawkins did not believe in God in that.
You know, God created all of us. He is big enough to control the universe. He can do whatever he wants.
Absolutely.
My little understanding, you know, is not going to put him in a box. So
Oh, absolutely. He's huge. We're just so small. We don't.
and you know, I
And
find
in some
comfort in
ways,
that. I find no comfort in that. You know, it's not up to
Yeah.
me.
and in some ways, that's what the Bible does, isn't it? It tries, as authentic as it tries to be, it tries to put him in a box and explain God. And we can't do that effectively.
The Jewish people carried God around in the box, remember?
That's right, Terry.
That's how
Sometimes,
they won their battles. They had them in
sometimes,
the box wherever they had their big battles.
yeah. In a
Till they
box, and
lost
they
that
had it
box.
on their heads.
Right. Yeah.
Lola, go ahead.
My favorite doctors are the ones who have faith and believe in God, because somehow they're the ones who have learned to navigate between science and the whole spiritual realm and live with it and use it.
Well said. Well said.
You know, Ron's a scientist
Yeah.
and he sees a big picture, and yet he's got a very fundamental faith that I admire. So it's all one pack.
Yeah, that's good.
I've known surgeons that have asked the person, do you believe in God and do you have people pray for you? And he says, when people pray for you, things happen that scientifically they can't say why and how it happened. And
Right.
that people have survived surgeries and the physician or surgeon couldn't explain why it happened.
Sure.
I believe that.
Well, thank goodness he is in control. It's too big for us to control. All of the world, all of the universe, everything are, and we as miniature little things here, he still helps us and controls us. What a wonderful thing it is when you think of it. How could we improve on it? We'll just take it the way it is.
We haven't even learned how to live together yet.
No.
Good point.
Right, yeah.
Good point. Well, there's a lot on the internet too about immortality and our attempts to resurrect ourselves. And of course, it mentions DNA resurrection, like in Jurassic Park, where someday in the future, maybe we'll be able to resurrect the dinosaurs from a piece of DNA. And even what, Vicky? Vicky says, please no, don't bring back the dinosaurs.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, people too, and we know we've cloned sheep and other animals. And so that is, but of course, that is making a copy of something. That's not immortality
Exactly.
of the
Exactly.
individual.
That's
So-
not creating an individual. That's just making a copy of one that we already have.
Mhm.
Only he can make a person. Only he. Yeah.
But when we copy something from DNA, which they've been able to do, if they could get the DNA of a previous animal, how you know they won't be able to copy it?
True.
Mm.
And then there's other ideas too. For example, I read that in his 1994 book called The Physics of Immortality, American physicist Frank Tipler promoted the general theory of the omega point theory, which outlines a resurrection of the dead in a future time when humans will have evolved from robots, which will turn the entire cosmos into a supercomputer. And we will be able to resurrect people from their past thoughts and create avatars in the universe of the future. So there's
That's
also
giving, yeah, that's giving the human mind an awful lot of power. You believe we have that power? No, I don't. God has that power.
Steve, what's the name of that book you mentioned about Einstein? What's the title?
it's called Einstein and Religion.
Mm.
Thank
And
you.
I will do an hour on that one of these days because it is quite interesting and talks not only about what he thought about religion, but what other physicists have said that energy and matter have to do with theology, and that if God was pure light and energy, that maybe that could be transmitted into matter, how light could change into matter, and the relation that would have to the incarnation. So there's some theorizing there that's quite interesting too. And it also goes into Einstein's childhood when he was raised Jewish and Christian at the same time, Catholic. So
Yeah.
he had that to fall back on, and he did. And
He wasn't a very good husband, as I recall reading about him.
No, I read that book that you just read. We read it in our women's book group.
you did?
Yeah, we read that a couple years ago. And it was a really interesting book. It wasn't as boring as it sounds because
Right.
they bring in like other people and other physicists and stuff. And then we read The Other Einstein, and it was
Wow.
about his wife, and the first wife. And actually she was smarter than he was. And she discovered some of his earlier things. She discovered some earlier things and he took them as his.
Oh,
So he wasn't like a really good guy. I mean,
okay.
and he was pretty nasty as a husband and father to his kids. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
was
there's a
an
little bit
interesting
about
book.
that in this book too, saying he was so obsessed with his work that he could be mean to other people and selfish,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
was, and he would go and lock himself in his office for weeks at a time, and the wife would bring him food, but he would obsess thinking on these physics questions.
Yeah.
And that's how he made his breakthroughs, I guess.
Well, he met her at the university in Switzerland because that was a big place for all that kind of stuff. And she did go. I mean, this was when women
Oh.
didn't go much, and she was accepted, and she met him there. So that's how it started. But that was a good book too, if you want to read it, The Other Einstein.
Thank you. Thank
It
you,
was-
Susie.
That was really interesting.
I
Very
think
good.
of Vicky as being a person of strong faith. I wouldn't want to put her on the spot, but would she voice her opinion on the physical resurrection?
Vicky, do you believe in the physical resurrection? He says, oh, yes, she does.
Okay.
She went into the other room.
Okay.
Yep. She's a person of strong faith too.
Yes.
Well, it's a good question, and I hope you guys don't mind us putting both sides of it out for discussion. It obviously is not something they're going to do in a sermon on Easter, but not appropriate
Yeah.
really
I
for
think it's
that
something
for
that
most people.
It's something that every Christian thinks about, so
Yeah,
it's a good subject for discussion.
I think you're right. On some level, in some degree, we all ask whether it was a real event or made up afterwards or what.
And we may change, in we grow in our understanding. So
To believe in Jesus and be a good Christian, the resurrection is not necessarily important.
yeah.
That's true.
what, that, at the test, and it seems like Einstein failed it, you know, of being a good husband, a good father, a good son, a good brother, a good sister. Those are the tests of faith, I think.
Good point. Doesn't help to be a real smart guy if you're not a nice guy.
Yeah.
Those people don't care.
Right. Well, this has been a good discussion, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
It reminds me of your Facebook joke, Steve, where the smart person jumped out of the airplane with the kid's backpack.
Yes.
Oh. Yeah.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, Doug, go ahead.
We have our grandchildren coming over and we're going on an Easter egg hunt.
Oh.
And so while I've been listening, I've been stuffing plastic Easter eggs,
Oh,
you know, with,
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
but I wanted to talk about what is the importance of Easter eggs. I did not
Okay.
know it.
Oh, yeah.
So I've looked it up and it says the egg, an ancient symbol of new life, has been associated with pagan festivals celebrating spring. For a Christian perspective, Easter eggs are said to represent Jesus's emergence from the tomb and resurrection.
Very
That's
good. Thank you.
interesting.
Makes sense.
of course, there are some groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses that just have fits about Easter eggs. They believe they're ancient
Right.
fertility symbols and sex ceremony. So,
They don't do any holidays, so
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, happy Easter, everyone.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, Doug. Happy Easter.
Thank
Bye.
you guys.
okay.
I
And
got,
Vicky
I'm
says thank
cooking,
you.
so I gotta go.
Okay. Thank you. Vicky says thank
Happy
you for
Easter.
your prayers and happy Easter to everybody. Take care.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.